name is Soumya Dubey from the Economic Times HR World, and I'm delighted to be your host and moderator today. Today, we have gathered here to move the needle on reloading culture, unlocking the path to a sustainable business transformation. This conversation has been meticulously crafted with Mark Business. In the dynamic landscape of modern workplaces, organizations encounter the task of nurturing a culture that corresponds to their objectives and principles. Yet, introducing a cultural shift often encounters opposition from employees and leaders. This session unites the CHROs and HR leaders to exchange their experiences, wisdom, and tactics for effectively revolutionizing an organization culture within the framework of a Barney world of work. Now is the opportunity to delve into the pivotal role of culture in facilitating enduring transformation and explore practical methods to initiate change, cultivate employee commitment, and attain sustainable business triumph. I'm elated to welcome the dynamic panel of speakers for this intriguing and a super promising session today. Joining me on the screen are Bertanu Das, Head HR, Corporate HR, Larsen and Toubro, Rajesh Rai, Head HR, Global Logic, Sanjay Jha, CHRO, Mahindra First Choice Wheels, and Krish, Head Trading and Consulting, Mark Business Transformation. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Soumya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Soumya.
Great. So the panel definitely reflects infectious energy. We are going to get started, but for the audience today, I encourage you all to actively participate in this session. If you have any questions or thoughts that you would like to share with me or the panel here, please use the chat window. We'll also keep an eye on all the questions during the session and we'll address as many as possible with the time. And yes, with this, let's really move the needle and move to the first question that I have very, very much ready for my panel. And Rajesh, I'm going to begin with you. How does culture influence sustainable business transformation? Let's just start with an example from your journey.
Okay, now thanks, Soumya. In my head, transformation always starts with identifying a higher purpose mission that galvanizes the whole organization. And that higher purpose is actually the root of all great transformations that take place. Because from the purpose gets derived the strategy that you would work on, and the strategy further defines the direction in which you will go, and how we will go about doing what we are wanting to achieve. And that then translates into behaviors and ways of working, what we define culture, right? Which therefore that becomes the culture of the place. But the baseline is really that higher purpose mission. Like, for example, if I talk about Global Logic, we are a Hitachi Group company. As Hitachi and Global Logic together, we are very passionate about what we call social innovation, that is powering good, right? Social innovation, therefore, is the higher end purpose that we are working on as a company all through and through. So all the innovation, digital transformations that we do have to lead towards bettering the society, improving the lives of people and community, and that piece is very central to us. So let's say if we are working with a healthcare client, right? We would work on a software that would regulate, say, insulin through medical pumps for patients, right? Or let's say we would help with remote health monitoring devices through technology. Or let's say build a connected world say for an automotive mobility client through the power of cloud, right? So it's all about what I call social innovation powering good. And therefore, culturally, if I was to deduct that, it means everybody is responsible for innovation, and that's an understood expectation, right? And that is what leads to transformation.
Well, that's a very new perspective. Thank you so much for adding that, Rajesh. And I'm going to come back to you in the course of the discussion. I would really want to delve a little more deeper on the social innovation. Krish, I'm going to come to you now. What are your thoughts around this?
I think Rajesh set it up beautifully. The way he called it out in my head
the purpose, the strategy, and the direction become the battery with which difficult change can be achieved, right? Because as he works with his client, the client then in turn has to change the user group. The user group has their own mindset when we're working. So it's two levels of change that they have to work with, right? The catch, however, and that's where in my head, the reloaded part also comes to, like all superhero movies, the reloaded part means some of the original remains, some new stuff comes in. I think in that behavior, ways of work journey that he called out, there is going to be usual suspects. We have to go slow to go fast. We have to bring in all layers of the organization. We have to include as many people as possible so that they share the vision. I think all of that is things that we know and we do. I think in the reloaded form, what we are now needing to think about is, what about the basic assumptions that an average employee has on what helps me survive in this organization? What helps me succeed in this organization? If I'm in an expert culture, and in an expert culture, it's brilliant ideas that succeed, in course of time, I'm going to be working on ideas and I might have less focus on people. I will still be delivering to the larger organizational goal. I will still be delivering to making an impact in the society. But in my shop, in my world, I'm still creating that pyramid in which I'm the boss, and I'm the boss because I'm really, really good at what I do. And that's where the culture starts working with or against whatever change we're rolling in. For me, for us, when we say sustainable change, we want the change to stick. Why do we want the change to stick? Because ability doesn't grow overnight. You give me something new to work with, and today's changes are all very complex, right? They're conceptually complex, or I have to learn new skills. I can't learn it overnight. I need to fail. I need to succeed. I need to try many things, right? That means there's going to be a curve, but guess what? The project has a go live date. I have a client date. I have a delivery date. So someone is going to shoot me, or at least there's a threat of someone going to shoot me. And all that is still culture, right? Which means post go live, after we have said green signal, we are doing it, I still need to continue learning. I still need to continue failing and learning from that. That's the sustainable change part of it. Does my culture give me space to allow an employee to grow new skills after the investment on the change is over? Right. And this is where, again, I'm coming back to that. How does the expert organization work? How does a really, really good organization work? Am I supposed to have learned it by then? Am I going to be compared with X who's learned it faster than I am? Right? At what point does the organizational investment on learning stop? So there is that whole secondary piece on what does the organization define as good? What is the deadline? What does it mean to have delivered a result? Those things start becoming important. And they become the canvas on which any of my changes are going to land. Right? So in short, in my head, I think we are now, as organizations, and that's a reloaded pass, we have become adept at playing both these fields.
Yeah.
I run into organizations all the time who are playing both places. For the project, make space for it, have a clear purpose, have a clear intention, include people, bring it along. That layer we have become really good at. But the second layer is what we are now messing around with. Can I do this with the organization, though the organization has been seeing me doing something very different? Will they pick this up? Will they run with it as if it's their own? Let me pause there. Did that make any kind of sense?
It totally did. Krish, thank you. I think it added a very different layer, and that's what we're going to unearth as we grow into this conversation. But very rightly pointed, maybe the vision is great, the mission is great, but we live in a world where we actually live under a lot of deadlines. And that's why that influence of a VUCA to a Bani world has come in. I'm just going to move the frame now to Batanu. Batanu, what would you like to add here?
I think this is a very, very relevant and topical subject for all the times. And, we know some of the proverbs just to set the context, or, I agree what Rajesh and Chris said. But just for the sake of repetition, I'll say that change is the only thing which is constant, right? Both at personal, professional, society, economic, country level, international level, change is the only thing constant, right? But what is important is how do we manage the change, right? And change and transformation go hand in hand, and they are synonymous to each other. That's what I understand. But like another quotation, if I have to say, of Peter Drucker, to remind all of us that, whatever effective may be your strategy, if cultural change management is not understood and perceived, communicated, and managed well, then it becomes a big challenge. And very rightly, and because of the cultural aspects, more than 70% as per research study, McKinsey study, and many other studies, a lot of the change management, interventions fail. And any change management that we aspire to do, there is a background, there is a reason for it, there is a vision for it, there is a large, what we call a long-term objectives, and of course purpose and other things also came up for the discussion. So transformation is all about, you are wanting to see something different than what we are today, and all aspects of your strategy will be able to manage through a logical brain. But the only people side, the softer side of the culture, your norms, your existing practices. So any transformation, yes, there is a relevance and need is there, but the most sensitive and soft aspect of strategic change is your people, which is the softer side. So unless what is in for them, what is in for the business, and what is that end state of this transformation, and how you are going to, show them that end state, and how it is good for the company, for the people, and how they're not, what is in for me, are not communicated, and buy-in is not there. Even though you have a management understanding and daily decision, but if it is not managed well in terms of communication, in terms of involvement, in terms of incorporating their viewpoints and suggestions from time to time, and if they are not handled well, your transformation, is bound to may not be successful or may not yield the desired result. And culture aspects are changing. So the changing aspects of culture also need to be understood. So it's a very, very sensitive subject, needs a lot of very careful handling of the management process, change management process.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But Anu, I couldn't have agreed more. I think not one force alone can drive this conversation, can drive this change. And the whole organization needs to come together. And that's why we can link it where Rajesh and Trish have said that, it is all about finding a bigger purpose. And that only comes through when everybody is together in this. But let's just try and understand a bit more here. We've talked about it, that why it is so important to have this change, or what are the metrics. Let's get into the action mode and understand, like, what are some of those practical strategies for driving a culture change within an organization. And the idea here is to kind of create a compelling vision board to inspire your workforce, your employees, to align with the values and actions. So that is something that's very critical. And Krish, can I start with you on this?
Sure. Thanks, Soumya. The challenge again is what's most visible and tangible to the organization is the change you're presenting with it, right? You're telling me to change this. So obviously it's a sense of you're taking away something from me, or you're giving me something new and you need to give me time. The change does absorb much of the time, emotions of the organization. What we are saying over here is that's relatively the easy part. The layer below is where the values sit. The layer below is why the organization is doing what it's doing today. It's doing X and Y and Z. Your culture led your organization to do that. You at the top of the pyramid have seen a different vision. You've introduced a change to bring the organization from yesterday to tomorrow. That's the story so far. Now, in this journey, it is important to start with for the leaders to accept what is the change they are bringing in. In the world of change, we call this first order change and second order change. The first order change is I was asking for a cup of tea and I've instead moved to a cup of black tea. Right? That's a first order change. It's a change in the way I do things. In a second order change, I asked for a tea and now I'm asking for a whole meal. It's a completely different change. As an organization, I'm improving efficiency. I'm adding one more product line. All of those are first order changes. When I decide to play in a completely different market and change the technology underneath, that's a second order change. Leaders sometimes get seduced by the fact that I've already done 15 changes. This is a 16 change, my team can handle it. But sometimes the nature of the change has itself changed. So step one, having leaders understand what they are bringing to the organization. You can understand some of the complications here because sometimes the leaders are themselves new to the organization. I got hired to bring in this new change, so obviously I'm going to roll the change out. And the rest of the leaders are saying, yeah, you go ahead, I'll follow. And the organization can see it. So part one, get leadership aligned to know the depth of the change they're bringing in. Second part of the equation is, it's not just about involvement, it's understanding why does the organization work the way it does. Organizations work the way they do because they have rules, and those rules are what we created. I was working with an organization to shift them from a pure productivity focus to a quality focus. Logical thought process, right? Can't be just about productivity. Productivity should be more about quality and the effort and the value you bring to the table. Guess what? 8 of the 10 KPIs are all focused on productivity. They're being measured on productivity all day. So, dude, obviously I can say all I want about quality, I can say all I want about safety. It's not going to land because the KPIs are focused on productivity. Rules. What rules are we working with? Some of them are stated, some of them are implied, but just look at the stated rules, the second part of the equation. Third part of the equation is, ask yourself, what risk are you bringing into the organization's current state, right? What do I mean by that? We were working with a team. It was a technology change. It was an ops dev community. And we were bringing everyone's favorite bad word, agile, into the game, right? As we brought agile into the game, that community of practitioners, they were feeling uncomfortable because they said, I don't trust my sales team to position me for success. You're going to tell me to offer agile. They'll start selling an agile-based development cycle, but they will do it so fast that I will not be included. And finally, customers are going to be disappointed. I'm going to be disappointed. And this is what I meant by saying, dig a little deep to find out what is making them successful so that you can address the right level of anxieties. All these three are at the very minimum required for us to be able to deal with the cultural significance of some of the changes, right? One last comment I'm going to make, Soumya, is you used the word metric a little while before. We need to put numbers here. We need to try and capture, is the needle moving with numbers? That's both the needle called culture, and we do that. We do objective measurement of the number in some form or shape. So that's one required. We also need to measure the change, right? How fast are people buying into the change? How many are continuing to use it? In most changes, when you roll it out, you get a lot of compliance. You don't get commitment. So are they committed to it? Are they going to stick to it? The third is, how well are they using it? We have all seen ERP rollouts where people eventually start downloading it into Excel files and using their spreadsheets again. Forget the predictive analytics of my lovely systems. I want to use my spreadsheet, right? How well are they using it? We need to track those numbers too to go to where they are.
That's a very interesting dossier, if I would call it, Krish, that you've put together. This sounds very intriguing, actually, what changed? I'm sure the leaders are really taking a note because I totally am. What risk are we talking about? And you very interestingly brought in the, the nuance of a compliance. And compliance, when it comes to, of course, the IT industries have it the most. I think they are the ones who really have to go by it. And that really compels me to get Rajesh here. Rajesh, what are your thoughts around this? Like, what are those top key line strategies for this?
I think, see, what happens is that, as I said, I spoke about purpose and then I spoke about strategy. Let me give you an example, right? When in 2013, today we all know Netflix and we sort of watch movies, everything we do on a daily basis. But back in 2013, I remember there was this memo, their CEO had sent, which basically said that, we are not just going to be content distributors. There are enough of them in the market. We're actually going to create some content which is original, which can then win Emmys and Oscars, right? Imagine if that is the expectation from your strategy or your purpose, that you're not going to be just distributors, you're going to be actually creators of content. What that effectively means is that all your employees would have to be geared up towards, that creating that original content or presenting that original content to the world. A very different proposition than just distributing content. Now, how does it translate to cultures? Obviously you will get, as a fellow employee, you will get measured of whether you've really innovated the content that you've put on the platform. Have you really given the world something different, right? So the core over here is that when business transformations happen, they happen basis some new growth direction or area that company would be looking at, which is in line with their overall purpose, right? There are several organizations like this. Microsoft, as an example, pivoted towards intelligent cloud solutions, right? They used to measure, and they still do, the percentage of revenue they're getting from their, from this new growth business, right, over the last 3 years. Netflix did the same, right? When they said we will present the world with innovative content, right, and not just distribution of content. Adobe, right? If I was to look at absolutely beautiful digital experiences, and they measure the percentage of revenue that they are getting from that pivot of the core that they gave, from necessarily just being known as a product company to a company that says, we're giving you products that will give you amazing digital experiences as a customer, right? Or talk about us, GlobalLogic, right? When we are talking, like, one of our customers where, we used to provide software development for their devices, which would help people who can't hear lead a very normal life, right? From throughout the day by just wearing that device, because that software would help you connect in the brain such that you can hear just like a normal person. So what is essentially happening through these examples is that when at a business, at an org level, you're measuring certain things on this transformation path, as, let's say, as I said, as a percentage of revenue or what percentage of growth is happening, what in effect you do, and I'm sure, this entire thing gets converted to dialogues in meeting rooms or when you're delivering to a client. And therefore, all of this forms what are the kind of expectations on performance, on behaviors that we have from our employees. And that's how it connects strategy and purpose to everyday behaviors. So the key to, the most practical way that I have seen, I've done it so many times myself, is that your fellow employee on the ground needs to have a sense of belongingness to that strategy or purpose or culture that you're talking about. How will I implement what you're saying in my job? If that gets answered, I think by and large, the battle is won, because you've just, given that employee a connection of their role and what they are doing within the company and the overall purpose or strategy of the place. And that is very powerful. And how does that happen? It happens when you are reinforcing all elements of your business transformation strategy, what you're looking for, pretty much day in and day out in the form of a dialogue with employees. Pretty much, right? I mean, there is never a day or a week which will reinforce some aspect of what is expected out of you. So, for example, if at GlobalLogic, I want my employees to be innovative, I can't just have a week or a quarter-long initiative and say, oh, be innovative. It doesn't happen like that. Innovation is in the DNA. We talk about it every day. There are people who are part of hackathons. There are writers' blog. People are filing patents. There are creative dialogues pretty much every day. There are people who are change makers. You name it, and it's happening. So it is a way of life. And to, as I said, continuous dialogue, continuous reinforcement of what that business transformation is all about, what that purpose, what that strategy is all about, is like core and critical to and then that's the most practical ways. Of course, it translates to various talent actions, right? Then in nuts and bolts, you want to get people promoted, you will of course ask a question: have they innovated enough? What new have they brought to their clients or to the table for GL? Right? Has that innovation happened? If it hasn't happened, possibly maybe the person has to go a little more further. They still have to up their innovation quotient. So then those things become part and parcel of, say, a performance management system or maybe a reward and recognition system. So you reinforce these behaviors through those talent actions. What gets rewarded are these behaviors if you display them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajesh. I think that was a very interesting take. So I really like this continuous reinforcement dialogue. Maybe that is one takeaway that I really, really want to take from here. But overall, thank you so much. And that actually makes me move a little bit of a gear to the next side of it, that how really my HR leaders today, if I would say HR or the people leaders, are kind of helping this entire paradox, how they are kind of decoding it. So Bertanu, I'm going to come to you now. And how can actually leaders foster, and like Krish said, that's one of the favorite terms, agility, but one of the most complicated ones too. So what is the role of leaders here?
I think some of the basic principles of change management, one has to always remember, right? As I said, you have to do the proper buying. There are 2-3 change management, very strategic interventions that I was driving, it could not become, we pushed it through, maybe, we could not understand certain subtle points of differences at the top level, So 1 or 2 people were not very much supportive of the change interventions. And finally, although we pushed it through, but after 3 or 4 years, it could not take root because one of the director had a larger share in the whole, whole business and the people. So therefore, alignment of the top at a strategic level is also very important. Now you are saying so therefore, not only communications, the point that I said, right? Communicating the end state, communicating the desired state, communicating what is in for me, and then involving all stakeholders into it are very important. Now, many a times, even though HR department as such or CHRO as such may not be driving as a business transformation, but they may be part of somewhere. But the change management skills are required to be built amongst the business leaders or maybe middle level managers. So in order to, and like you said, how are you going to bring those innovations, agility, and I'll focus on agility. Agility means, you have to identify someone as who are there your protagonist or who are certain positive as enthusiast who understand this subject much better. Some positive minded people, some people who are seen as change crafter. So if you can identify those people and push the agenda initial level with building the change management skills amongst your business people and focus on right communications at all stages, listening to stakeholders and from all sections and correcting your strategy. Even if you are not correcting, you have to go back and tell them this is the reason why you are not able to correct this, right? You should have that courage of conviction to go back to people. So communication is very key. Change management skills are very key, not only for the HR, right? Outside, they should, and then that alignment that I said, not only at the top, but at all across, right? At least the change champions who are going to drive. So these are some of the very basic, I'll say that change management fails for the basic things that sometimes we ignore. So therefore, if you have done your basic things well, and honesty of purpose is there, transparency is there in terms of communicating, and the leaders are absolutely courageous to stand in front of people and say that this is why I am doing, right? If, for example, what is that coffee shop which that Tata has acquired?
Starbucks.
Starbucks CEO is the best example that everywhere I quote, right? When something went wrong in one place, they closed down their shops for 2-3 days. 2-3 days, no, 7 days, all across the globe. And that CEO had the courage to tell to their people that this is the issue we faced, and we have to reinvigorate and understand what do we stand for, and how do we bring back that customer satisfaction with quality service by our people. And he admitted that this is where we have gone wrong, and I want to correct this. I would not like to do business, right, unless and until this is corrected. So that kind of courage and convictions of the top leaders are very much essential. So I had this much of to say in this area.
Thank you, Bertanu, for that. Krish, I'm going to come to you. I think Bertanu pointed out a very important thing. It is about the communication. It is about courage. But one thing that I really like is that we just don't need change makers. We actually need these cheerleaders, because this entire change needs to be driven with a lot of passion, and that is not like an easy hat to wear.
No.
So I'll just come back to you. Maybe, what would you like to add to this?
Part of that inclusion and involvement we talked about. again, take a step back. Culture is, as we said, something that we create. In fact, every founder, every organization creates when they start first speaking about their organization. And that is all about how people can survive, get by, and thrive. We are bringing a change. Culture slowly becomes an organism and it tries to protect itself. Why? Because it's a proven formula to get by, thrive, survive. To get those three things done, this culture is a proven formula. When you bring a change in, the existing culture is going to treat the change with some skepticism, with some concern, with some anxiety, right? And in that environment, the best voice to talk about, let's go to this new possibility, let's go to this new future, is not necessarily the voice of the leader. Why? Because the voice of everyone knows that the leader wants the change talker. So you have a bias towards it. But having the voice come from amongst its own layers, among its own grades, among its own team, makes a difference. You're talking my language because you and I are sharing the same cubicle, same floor. Those are your change influencers, your change ambassadors, your change champions, your cheerleaders, because they are from within the system. That's one thing worth keeping in mind. I think the other thing worth keeping in mind is in today's world, and Rajesh, I was thinking about this when you gave your example, right? The culture of innovation that you spoke about. In today's world, that culture of innovation is now a collective organism, right? It's how well I can innovate with and through others. So it's not just me and my brilliance that drives the innovation game forward. It's about how I'm able to create a chain, create different peptide change, if you like, right? And make sure that we are successfully managing something new. Now that working with and through others, again, part of my culture. If I am an expert culture, if I'm a culture driven by individual excellence, making that shift, not necessarily easy. Again, Soumya, like Bartanu said, we need additional voices, right? Like Rajesh said, that additional voices, we need structures, we need organizational structures that support the new culture. So if till yesterday, before Rajesh instituted this whole thing, talent management was purely about how well did you achieve your goals last year. Now Rajesh is bringing in the tweak and saying, not just how well, but how innovatively, how differently did you do it? Have you brought challenging into your team's parlance as a manager? Have you made it easy for the team to challenge, question? Have you made it easy for the team to collaborate? Guess what? That's a critical part of being innovative. Those structures are equally important, right? So change influencers, yes. Structures, equally yes. There's a third element. We should look at how people look at their jobs. Again, part of culture, right? If I look at my job, most people, especially if I'm thinking about us in India, the job is my identity, not my role, my job, right? We have slowly got used to now thinking of our role a little flexibly. I can do this role, I can do that role. But till before, it was role and job are both my identity. And that's an organizational structure that is provoking that reaction. Because every time I'm interviewing you, every time I'm discussing you, every time I bring you into the room, my introduction starts with, you are holding this role. You are holding this job. This is the brilliant stuff you did. If my culture is revolving around designations, if my culture is revolving around promotions, again, change becomes a little difficult because everyone is wedded to that one way of doing things. That's what made me successful yesterday. Please don't change that. I guess that's a third element. Get the change influencers, support them with good organizational structures that allow people to think a little more fluidly about how they do what they do, and maybe underline the new innovation or the new theme. Maybe it's innovation, maybe it's safety, maybe it's risk-taking, call it what you will. The third piece, make sure people are not exclusively viewed as their jobs. They're viewed as something beyond their jobs. My favorite example on this is 2 decades back, people will start the introduction by saying, I am so-and-so, I have this designation, I do this. Today, people introduce themselves saying, I'm so-and-so, I have a family that does this. I like doing this on weekends. This is my favorite hobby. And oh, incidentally, this is what I do for a living. This is what I do for a job. It is a changing world. And if you want sustainable change, we got to go where the world is. Again, over to you.
Yes, that's a very fresh take on that, Krish. Thank you. Rajesh, is there anything that you would want to add to Krish and Bartanu here?
I think just one thing that, as I said, for me, business transformation or change for sustainability happens when employees, a fellow employee, right? And I can walk up to anybody and ask that employee, how do you understand where we are headed as a company? And they're able to spell it out in the form of a story they understand. And that story is almost, it's almost close to the direction. Then I've possibly been successful, because then I know that that employee will go and infuse what their understanding is into their work and make things happen. So that's number one. If I was to look at from a people perspective, I think one of the very good, two powerful techniques I have always found is, one is the concept of shared success or shared goals, right? Because obviously you can't do any of what you're doing, and in today's times, definitely not. If you are working in silos, or the org machinery as a whole doesn't, like a ship, right, get to a direction. So the concept of shared success then becomes, or shared goals becomes, very powerful, because then I know that I have to collaborate with somebody else, right, within the ecosystem for my success, and that function slash fellow employee will also have to work with me to get the goodies and transform. Second is that as Krish also said, this is the age of continuous reinvention. So it's not that, when we talk about sustainable business transformation, it is just not a one-off here and there. It is about continuously trying to reinvent what you've invented and being successful at, right? And that has to be therefore built into the culture, like I spoke about innovation. And how that gets built is, as I said, a continuous, absolutely relentless dialogue around different ways in which your function or slash organization is achieving that transformation or achieving that transformative strategy. I think those are the ways. And as I said, it does translate. If your employee actions eventually are rewarding and recognizing what you have envisaged as part of that transformation, then I think you are sort of on the right path. Like you can't, let's say, you can't promote somebody if you're, let's say, saying that innovation is the DNA of the company and somebody just doesn't do it. You can't promote that person. It's as simple as that. It just makes no sense, because that's not what you're looking for, right? So that's how the two get combined on the ground in practical terms. And, like 2-3 years back, I remember, I think HBR had published this study where they looked at Fortune 500 and I think S&P. I think that list they had looked at, and they had, marked the percentage of new, the success of the percentage of revenue that they were looking at from new growth areas, because that is so linked to sustainable business transformations. And they had, I think, the top 50 list over there. All those companies that you see are actually following principles like these, the cultural principles like these, right? Many of the names I mentioned happen to be, from that list as well. And you can actually read the name and see what they focused on. And today, after about 3-4 years, you can actually relate back, saying, yes, what they were looking for actually happened. So that's what I would say.
Well,
Yeah,
that's very inspirational.
I think related to what Rajesh said, I'll just talk about 1 or 2
Sure.
points. While it is very important to recognize the resistance and anticipate some of the barriers that may come, but at the same time, listening to them with empathy and wherever necessary, management, top management, or the change crafter should be mentally prepared that yes, there is something needs to be corrected, and if it is not customization based on feedback of the people is very essential, even if it does not make a very big digression to the objectives of the transformation exercise. That is very number one. Number two, when you are driving it, it is very important that he said that rewards, recognize some of the things, or sorry, reward and recognize some of the good things that are happening, right? And third most important thing, that is what I have experienced, is, let us say you are driving digitalization, which is the most topical and most important, in the current era, information era that we are living in. Now then, digitalization may call for some amount of BPR, means business process change or restructuring, or maybe bringing some innovation into it, maybe removing some muda means something which was good for yesterday or good for today, but is not good for tomorrow. But also people are not wanting it, or digitalization process itself is not doing that. So making it more user friendly, policy and your existing process review are very, very important. So top management sometimes should also be a little flexible, all the change drivers, to accommodate some of these small or important aspects, and then drive it. Then it becomes, without compromising on the very fundamental aspects of the change management principles or change management what we call project. Then I think then it will lead towards success, right?
But thank you. Thank you for adding that. Just moving the conversation back and trying to give some real examples to the audience. Krish, I can come to you for this one, maybe. Could you just share maybe one of those stories where a successful cultural transformation was planned, executed, where an HR leader played a pivotal role, and how they actually took up that onus of being a strategic enabler for achieving this entire transformation? Maybe that story will add a lot of angle to this.
Absolutely, Soumya. I'm going to take the example of Sandoz, which eventually became a Novartis company.
Yeah.
And they went through this process. Their starting point was very interesting. The starting point was, we're doing success. We are well positioned in the market. We are industry leaders. Our profitability is just too good. So everything from an organizational perspective is doing well, but people are feeling burnt out. People are feeling stressed. People are feeling that they have to give more and more because they got to keep demonstrating themselves. I'm only as good as the stuff that I brought to the table yesterday. And that is the environment in which they said, no, I want to have a North Star, which makes me a little bit of a leadership factory. It makes it easy for people to come into my workplace and say, this is the workplace I want to be in. I enjoy coming up to work every day, and I feel energized when I leave work tomorrow. I think that thought process was what they were chasing. And we had an HR leader there. The CHRO's reportee was working on culture. We had the CHRO themselves, and we had one person from the business. Three of them went through. I'm sorry, I'm going to bring in a culture certification here. They went through that process. They decided that they're going to evaluate what their culture should be like. They discovered something interesting. They would have liked to see a constructive culture, a culture that values goals, values growing people, values doing better every day with and through others. And what they found about their organization was that they seem to tilt in two directions. One, when it comes to tasks, do them really, really well. And because I got to do them really, really well, I'm always going to try and push my task over your task. It's always going to be a fight over prioritization. I'm going to fight over resources, one part of it. And the other part of it is, when the conflicts got too serious, people would try to be accommodating. People would try to follow. We did this 3 years back. Let's just stick to the same things. And it was weird. One part of the Sandoz engine, one part of the organization, the engine was pushing towards doing brilliant stuff for the customer, new stuff for the customer. But there was another part, and this is every employee over there, effectively, which is also trying to preserve today. Right? This was a process that they took about 18 months on, and they measured themselves at the end of that period. The difference was dramatic. They actually had moved the needle. By the time they finished, they could see that they were now a constructive culture. They had numbers to match that. What they did was many things that have been discussed, including what your panelists just said, right? What Rajesh said, what Bartanu said. They started at the top to recognize the fact that each time you say, let's do something new, you're also telling people that the old is bad. And when you say the old is bad, that puts some functions at risk. So there's going to be someone in governance who says, "Oh, apparently I should keep doing something new." Someone in HR ops is going to say, "Apparently doing old stuff is not good enough." So you're creating those classes in the organization. Part one. Part two, you also, when you say do it right, we'll never fail someone. When you send out messages like that, you're saying you better not be wrong. If you're wrong, you're going to be in trouble, right? When every time you say we will do it, we always want to do it, you're making it difficult for someone to be a skeptic. Someone wants to say, dude, that's really not going to work, but they can't say it because there's a whole energy in the room, positive energy that says, we will do it. And anything which stops that process is dangerous. So there's a lot of reflection, a lot of analysis, a lot of data. And they had discovered, here's what we tend to do. This is what we naturally start doing. Those leaders then onboarded their reporting, and that was beautiful to watch. It's not funny the number of times the organization announces the change, but the minus ones are not convinced, right? These were leaders who actually sat with their minus ones and said, look, this is what we are doing. We are making this happen. What can you change? What can I change? They went through that process, and it was a layer by layer process, right? And I've seen that layer by layer work really, really well. You have to go slow to go fast. You have to start at the top and give them the time to absorb what they are doing unintentionally. And I think it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have I think of all the corporate functions, HR is probably the most patient. HR as a function is result oriented, but they're also patient. They understand that good things take time. They're patient to themselves. They're patient. They give that ability to be patient to other business leaders to say, yeah, don't call it a failure yet. It's working.
Yeah.
HR respects anecdotal evidence. So I think all those things were brought to the table by HR championing that cultural change. Okay, that's my story. Over to you.
That's really helpful, Krish. Thank you so much. And that really gives me a platform to think about it, that culture is something that's integral to everyone. Even if you're like a high performing organization, that doesn't mean that you have a great culture, and vice versa. Because we only take cognizance of it when we feel, oh, we're in a red zone. There's something terribly wrong. Let's try and fix that. But this story really gives us a very different viewpoint. Thank you. And I have about 10 minutes, and I do want to take the audience questions. So maybe the last question that I have for the three of you, I will take like a one anecdote each. Rajesh, I'm going to come to you. We've talked a lot about what is the importance of culture, why we need it, what are the probable steps we can take. And yes, we did have a little mention about the resistance to this culture change. So that's very important, aspect that I want to uncover with you. So let's just understand and let my audience understand today that what can be one effective technique or an approach that a people leader can use to engage the employees and probably, address a resistance that they see when they're undergoing this transformation. So maybe a hack that you have for the audience today.
Oh, it's a very well-known, very, very well-known hack. It's called communicate. So I'll possibly multiply it to 3, say communicate, communicate, communicate. See, it's a lot about perspective, all right? And I was looking at the Q&A and somebody asked that, what if the pace of change is really fast? Unfortunately, we are living in those times when the pace of change is, in fact, internally, externally, everywhere you go is so fast, right? So fortunately or unfortunately, we have to live with it. And therefore, strategies around communication, where I, as a fellow employee, understand what it means for me, and I'm not overthinking thereafter, saying, oh, this did not get answered, that did not get answered, I did not understand this, etc. By and large, most resistance comes from, oh, this was the way we used to do it, we were so comfortable, now we'll have to change, right? Or what is the impact on me first, right? As human beings, our brains being primitive, not so evolved even today, we still continue to think, right? That way. So therefore, communicate, every question, comment, observation is important. It's painful, but communicate.
Absolutely. I mean, that was just one of the best things. Thank you for that, Rajesh. Krish, what is your one anecdote? And just we'll keep it like maybe one statement, max.
We had an organization where we were changing the workflow tool, and the team was struggling. I don't want to call it resistance, I'll call it anxiety. There was a very heightened anxiety around it. We did what Rajesh talked about, communicate. I just want to underline that in this context, or in most of these anxiety contexts, it's not what you say, it's what you listen to. We had a leader who came in and said, I'm going to listen, and we coached him. We made sure that we said, they're not going to talk easily, so you need to make the space for it to talk. And we set it up as 15 minutes a day is going to be devoted to just listening. And just listening. The person would not come in with slides, would not say anything, just listen. Got off to a very slow start, but by the time we were 1 week in, there were people coming and talking, not ranting, talking, not cribbing, but they were talking about, have you thought of this? I mean, what is making you do this? And no matter how tempted this leader was to speak, the instructions was no, just listen. And as they listened, it built the organization's sense that the organization wants to hear us. And slowly that wall between organization is doing this to me went away. And the tone of those 15 minutes changed. People were coming and offering solutions, right? We broadened that, but it was, I'm getting gooseflesh still. It was amazing to watch, right? So communicate with a high focus on listening. Just listen. Don't be tempted to solve problems, right? Dr. Soumya.
Wow, sometimes it's good to diffuse it. Thank you. But Tanu, I'll just come to you. What is your one take on this?
No, we heard communicate, listen. I will just add two more words into it. Involve. And last is participate. I'll tell you one example. Although we had done communicate and listening, but one initiative long back, of course, 8-9 years before, I was driving across to develop middle-level managers through a proper succession planning process. We did everything as per the rule book and it worked. But in the last segment of the value chain was the business leaders have to communicate the feedback. So I left it to them, or the team, the project team that I was heading. We said, okay, he's the right person to do it. Let us leave it. Now one of that region, the one last leg of that process was not done through proper involvement and through participation. It was delayed by more than 1 year or 1.5 years. Now the entire project failed primarily because of the last leg was not handled properly. So next time when I learned this, I took feedback from people, I spoke to him, and then I went myself to be there for 2-3 days, sat with him. So I involved myself calling people to give the feedback. So I participated in the whole process, involved him how to do it and when to do it, and I remain present in that communication process in one-to-one sessions. And it was not done culturally. Every organizations, create a typical cultural norms over a period of time that they do. That part was never there. It was a new thing for them. So therefore, they had a lot of anticipated fears and unknown things that, okay, if I am communicating this, maybe I have to give this role to him after 1 year or so. If he comes back, what should I do? If he knows that he's a high potential guy, tomorrow, he will show this to outside world, I may lose him. A lot of such things were there. So I'll say communicate, yes, very important. That's the most important. Listening is another very important. But participate with them as a change crafter. Really, you are, and be there with them. Assimilate yourself in the last leg of the people who are driving it. I think that would help to a great extent for the success of any transformation project. Just to make it more meaningful, since we did it well, after learning from the failure, that project became a global best project, and we won a CEO Best Project Award because of that project. Of course, it was delayed by 2 years, but we learned the right way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that sum up. But that was fantastic. And I still have 6 minutes. There are very interesting questions that have come in today. But just due to the paucity of time, we'll try and take the ones that actually serve the bigger purpose here. Let me just start with the first question. And this is open. What do you do in a situation where the top management themselves decides to go differently with one of the core values inculcated since years amongst employees? I think that's a very, very interesting question. So, Krish, Rajesh, Tanu, anyone you would want to take this up? I think Rajesh is going for it. Yes, Rajesh, please.
Oh, I can. Okay. See, I mean, in my head, any form of cultural change has to be institutionalized through people. And it cannot be a one-sided affair. So I don't know what the context of the question is, but if it has been a one-sided affair, then possibly there's something not quite correct, is how I look at it. Because as I said, culture and core values of a company are shared. They don't belong to a particular level or a group, or I mean, it's for the organization as a whole, is how I would say. And therefore, maybe raising the right questions in some of the right forums would possibly open the dialogue up as to what really engineered that 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 change or sudden change, as the question puts it. I'm putting it the right forums, may not be public forums, maybe some very classified forums, but definitely getting to the bottom of it as to what really went behind if there was a change in such in a direction. That's how I would answer.
Just add one thing to what Rajesh
Yes,
said,
Krish.
which is again, depends upon who the person is. If you're one of the leaders and you have broken the value in order to bring the culture in, we must go back to what Rajesh, Vartan, and I said earlier, right? The communicate, the listen, the involve, the participate. We need to bring it to them. And let's face it, for the kind of changes that we're dealing with today, the organization is going to pivot a few times, and there are going to be those changes. As a leader, it's very important for us to make organizations under us pull change towards them. That's the kind of culture we want to bring, because tomorrow I don't know whether it's going to be about risk taking, it's going to be about innovation, it's going to be safety, it's going to be about working from home. I don't know what cultural challenge my team is going to have. I just need to make my team lean towards change, and that is a cultural change. And that might require breaking some stuff. And if you're breaking stuff, take it to the teams. If I'm the employee, then I must ask myself the question, right? I don't trust the outcome that came up. You broke a value of mine. Do I trust the process? And if I don't trust the process either, do I trust the people? And keep that in mind. Trust comes in layers, right? Yes, they did something that was unacceptable, but do you trust the people behind it? And do you think they're, and that's the kind of mental conversation I would request the employee to have. And then follow up with what Rajesh said, right? To have this conversation with someone, maybe within the organization, have it. But remember, it's not make or break. Nothing is eventually make or break. From a cultural perspective, that's why we need a constructive culture. We need a culture that allows completely opposite thoughts. As an adult, that's the one thing that we know, right? We have to have completely contradictory thoughts in our brain. That's the way it works.
Krish, basis your last answer, Vikram is asking us that, could you share some matrix which helped you measure the amazing stats that you shared? I think that's going to be very helpful.
So this was something called a circumplex, is a human synergistic circumplex, where we are able to go to the organization and find out what do the leaders and key members of the organization see as an ideal culture, what do they have as a current culture, and what is the gap, right? We take that from the employees, and then we go into details of which practices are causing it and which policies are causing it. We go back, we tweak them, and the journey that I talked about happens, and then we again go back and measure it. We're measuring it across the organization. So it's not any one group alone that's calling it out. But eventually the test is it matching with, is the current culture matching with the ideal culture? It's called the HS circumplex, if you would like.
Even McKinsey does that through the Org Health Index. They have something called the OHI, very, very powerful in similar words, just like what Krish mentioned, right? Extremely powerful to look at what aspect of the culture needs a change or a tweak with respect to your overall business transformation direction.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Rajesh, Krish. That really leaves us with no time. It's already 4. So the 60 minutes just went away, but I think this has been a very, very thorough and a very interesting conversation. And of course, I see there are a lot of questions from our attendees that were left unanswered today, and our apologies. But like I promised at the start, we will get back to you with the answers. So team ETHR and Mark will get back to you on the relevant answers for them. So that is one thing that I really want to leave you with. But before that, thank you so much, Krish, Rajesh, Vartanu. I think this has been, like I said, a very, very thorough and a very interesting conversation, and a much needed one. We've been talking about that, how much, it is the highest time now to discuss culture and bring out the best. So thank you so much. And to our audience as well, thank you so much for joining in for keeping this session so lively, for your questions, for your reflections. We've taken a note of them and we'll definitely try and work on them for the next one. But with this, thank you so much once again, everyone. Have a great evening and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Rajesh.
a
Thanks,
lot.
Vartanu. Thanks, Soumya.
Thank you. Thank you.